Hey everybody, I'm Josh McFall, the Education Director of the Alabama Association of Realtors, with my good friend here, Jim Lawrence.
Good morning, how are you guys?
Many of you know Jim, and we're excited to have Jim here for this webinar today to roll out a brand new course called The American Dream for All, Fair Housing in Today's Market. So Jim is going to provide all of you who are watching a preview of this course, and then we'll tell you about an opportunity that you and your agents can attend a live version around the Realtor Day celebration coming up in April here. So we're going to switch over to Jim's PowerPoint now and see if we can get that up and running. It may take me just a second to switch up to that, Jim. Let's see. See if we can get this up and rolling. And if so, we will get that going. Okay, Jim, I think we are up and going, so take it away for us there.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity. Let me tell you, brokers, actually where this class came from. The Alabama Association of Realtors actually partnered with the Alabama Center for Real Estate in taking a proactive stance on fair housing issues in the state of Alabama. And we've come up with this course, and you see the title again, The American Dream for All, Fair Housing in Today's Market. And I want to share some things with you as we go into this. First, I want to make sure you understand that by way of disclaimer, I am not an attorney. This is not a course of, I'm not going to give you any legal advice because I am not an attorney. This is my and our interpretation of information, and my primary sources were HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and the Department of Justice, DOJ information websites. Two very, very good, very effective websites, and that's where I've done most of the information, pulled the information from. So that's where the course came from. Now, I want to introduce the course to you brokers, and again, I appreciate you being here with us this morning, and I hope you take from this something back to your people to see why we need to emphasize the program. If I were to say to you, what is your present mindset? What comes to mind when I say to you fair housing? What comes to mind? Is it civil rights? Is it an emphasis on the past and where we've been in Alabama? Or because I think for us to do an effective job as brokers and for the course to be effective with your salespeople, I think what we've got to do is not look backwards, but look forward. We've got to change attitude before we can change the way fair housing is dealt with here in the state of Alabama. And I'm going to tell you a book that has a tremendous amount of influence on me. I've just finished it at the recommendation of NAR and also Jeremy Walker and Josh here at Alabama Association of Realtors. The book is called Diversity Explosion. Diversity Explosion. It's by Dr. William Fry, and Fry is spelled F-R-E-Y. The book is subtitled How New Racial Demographics Are Remaking America. And I think when I teach the course to your people, this is one of the approaches I will take in the presentation of the course. Again, we'll try to leave the past behind, and I will quote some statistics and numbers and predictions from this book. And let me just give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. And these are based on censuses, so this is real stuff. Dr. Fry says this: in 2011, 4 years ago, due to the rapid growth of what he calls the new minorities, defined as Hispanics, Asians, and multiracials, there were more minority babies born than white babies for the first time in United States history, year 2011. And listen to this. Listen to the change in population of the under 18 American change in population now based on U.S. censuses from the year 2000 to 2010. Whites, minus 4,311,000. Blacks, minus 248,000. Asians, plus 756,000. Multiracials, plus 883,000. And Hispanics, plus 4,789,000. Dr. Fry predicted that the labor force, the workforce, by the year 2030, looking from the year 2010, 2030, there will be minus 15 million whites in the labor force by the year 2030, plus 2,500,000 blacks in the labor force, plus 4 million Asians in the labor force, and plus 17 million Hispanics in the labor force. And here was the statistic that got my attention more than any. By the year 2040, Dr. Fry predicts there will be no racial majority in the United States, no racial majority. So therefore, I think for us to do what we need to do concerning fair housing and the American dream, we've got to change too. We've got to look forwards and not backwards. So let me introduce you to the course then. All right, Josh, it's not changing screens for me, so I'm hitting, there we go. Let me define dwelling. Let me define dwelling for you as, this is according to the Department of Justice now. A dwelling, and therefore the fair housing laws pertain, is defined as any building or structure which is designed to be occupied as a residence. Any building or structure which is designed to be occupied as a residence, or vacant land for residential purposes. And I think you and your people need to know that definition. Now, one of the things I do in the course is I do look past, because I think that the people need to know where this all came from. I look at the history of fair housing in America, and it goes all the way back to 1866. And what was 1866? Right after the Civil War, right after the Lincoln administration. And this is the wording now from the Civil Rights Act of 1866. The act declared that people born in the United States are entitled to be citizens without regard to race, color, or previous condition of slavery or involuntary servitude, and that they had the same right that a white citizen had to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property. And then moving forward now, almost 100 years, Civil Rights Act of 1964 added the protected classes of religion, sex, national origin to the two previous protected classes, race and color, and specifically addressed voter registration, school segregation, public facilities, and accommodations. And in the Civil Rights Act of 1968, Title 8, commonly referred to as what we know as the Fair Housing Act, was a follow-up to the 1964 Act that included equal housing opportunities for the protected classes. So we spend a little time with history. And then, because your people are realtors as well, I will remind them above and beyond the 7 protected classes according to the Department of Justice and Housing and Urban Development and federal rules and regulations. Our Realtor Code of Ethics has recently been updated and included 2 other protected classes. Our Article 10 now says this: not only does it include the 7 protected classes mandated by the federal fair housing laws, but it's added 2 additional classes: sexual orientation and gender identity. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. So we deal a little bit with the history of fair housing in America. Then I get right into the 7 federally mandated protected classes, and I give definitions and examples of each. Some of these are more obvious than others. Race, such as Asian American, African American, American Indian, white American. Color, such as black, white, yellow. And notice the word colored in quotation marks. If you've got any agents who are under the age of 40, that's not a word they're familiar with. But I'm older than 40, trust me. And I grew up in Troy, Alabama in the 1940s and 1950s. It was a very segregated community, a very segregated society. And we had movie theaters with 2 entrances. We had water fountains with labeled white and colored. And so this is a word that has to do with color that some people will be familiar with. National origin, the third of our 7 federally mandated protected classes, such as Mexican, Chinese, African, and Italian. Religion, such as Baptist, Jewish, Roman Catholic, Muslim, and yes, atheist. Even though that's not considered a religion, it falls under the category of a protected class. Sex, such as male or female. Handicap, physical or mental impairment, such as blind, deaf, disabled, and alcoholism, and that's a very controversial one that we'll talk about later. Familial status, the last of our 7 federally protected classes, such as families with children, a pregnant woman, someone adopting a child under 18. So those are the 7 mandated by the federal government. And then here are the 2 the 2 additional classes from the realtor community. Sexual orientation, such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and gender identity, just recently added, such as a man who thinks of himself as a woman. So the 7 federally mandated protected classes and the 2 additional classes added by our Article 10 Code of Ethics. So we deal with those 9 in this class, and I address those 9. Now, let's talk about even those last 2 added by the realtor community. Even though they're not specifically addressed in the federal laws will touch on them. For example, if a gay person is perceived by a realtor as maybe having AIDS or a sexually transmitted disease, that's a protected class under the category of handicapped. So the 2 realtor additional classes can be incorporated into the 7 national. Now, let's talk about the illegal acts, and because time will prevent us from going through a lot of the other materials, this is important, and it's important that your people understand this should they attend the full 3-hour CE class. Here's what's illegal for us to do as licensed real estate agents and as realtors. It's illegal for us to refuse to sell or rent to any member of a protected class, or to refuse to negotiate for housing, or to make housing unavailable, or to set different terms and conditions, or falsely deny that housing is available, or advertise indicating a limitation or a preference. And more about these later as far as specifics. But this is an illegal act. We cannot do these things. And what's difficult for us as real estate licensees and realtors is the fact that sometimes our customers and our clients will put us on the spot. For example, we may be in the process of listing a property, and we may have a seller who will say to us, well, I want to list with you, and I like your marketing plan, and I like your everything you've presented, but I'm telling you this, I do not want you showing and selling my house to a member of, and then they will name a protected class. We can't do that. And yet agents are put on spots there. Agents are knowing this might be a very good listing. It might be priced right in a great neighborhood. It may be in great condition, and the agent can already sense that commission income, and agents are income driven, as you know. And yet this condition and these terms, these illegal terms, are put on the agent by the seller. And what does an agent say? How many agents will walk away? How many agents will take the listing and look the other way? How many agents, what do they know to say? Well, we'll deal with that in this course. I'll show you that a little bit later. But these are the kinds of things. If you're in the property management business, and this happens all the time because we deal with actual cases in this course, you don't say to a majority, to say a white person, that this apartment is available, and then turn right around and say to a minority that it is not available. And yet that happens, I'm afraid to admit, sometimes in our industry. So one of the illegal acts is refusing to sell or rent to a protected class. Here's another one. This is the second of the illegal acts. It's guiding prospective buyers. It's called steering. Guiding prospective home buyers or renters towards or away from prospective areas based on a protected class, or advising buyers or renters towards ROA from certain neighborhoods, or failing to show buyers or renters properties that meet their specifications. Again, we as buyer's agents pick up a buyer, and we start showing the buyer property, and the buyer says to us, and they are, notice I said we are a buyer agent, they are our clients, and one of the fiduciary duties is to obey their lawful instructions. And they say, well, now we want you to show us houses, but we only want you to show us houses in a certain kind of neighborhood. And again, that kind of neighborhood, in that buyer's opinion, is based on steering towards a protected class or away from a protected class. Well, that's not a lawful instruction. That's a violation of the Federal Fair Housing Act. We can't do that. How do you deal with that? What do your people know to do when this situation occurs? And it does occur. That's called steering. That's an illegal act, and we deal with that in the course. And then the third of our 3 illegal acts is called blockbusting. It's an attempt, inducing or attempting to induce any person to sell or rent by proposing the entry or prospective entry into the area of persons of a protected class. This doesn't happen as often as the other 2, but it can happen. Where an agent would go in, a licensee would go in, a realtor would go in and say, hey, you better sell your house and you better list with me and you better do it fast because your neighborhood is changing and the change is going to harm your property value. So you better list with me right now at a reduced price so we can get this house moved in a hurry. That's called blockbusting, and that too is illegal. So we can't do that. That's something that's out of line. Now, let's talk about special situations and exemptions a little bit. And this is an important part of the course. Handicapped. American with Disabilities Act of 1990. And I'll tell you right now, the ADA is probably as active as any organization in looking out for and ensuring that its members are taken care of, and those people who are disabled or handicapped. And here's their definition. Defined as a person with a physical or mental impairment, which substantially limits one or more major life activities of that person. And that's how they define handicapped or disabled, that one or more of the major life activities of this buyer or seller are substantially limited. So that's the definition of handicapped. Now, here's what we can't do as agents concerning those who are handicapped. It is illegal for us we can't inquire if a person is handicapped. Even if we think they might be, we cannot ask that question. Number 2, property owner must allow a handicapped tenant to make reasonable, keyword reasonable, modifications to allow full use of the residence. So if we have someone who is handicapped, say in a wheelchair, and we are the landlord or the property owner, we've got to allow that person to make reasonable modifications to allow full use of the residence. And in the course, we'll define reasonable. And then number 3, the property owner must allow certain accommodations for the handicapped tenant. For example, if an apartment complex says no pets, no animals, and yet perhaps you have someone who is legally blind and they have a seeing eye dog, that animal would have to be allowed there. Or maybe you've got an apartment complex or a condominium complex that has assigned parking spaces. And if you have someone who is unable to walk, who's in a wheelchair, they've got to be given special parking accommodations near their building, regardless of whether the parking spaces are assigned or not. That's what's meant by making certain accommodations. Look at this. This concerns the modification of a dwelling for a handicapped tenant. Modifications must be at the handicapped tenant's expense. They've got to pay for it. And the property owner may require the handicapped tenant to restore the property to its original condition at the end of the tenancy. And in fact, the landlord can have the handicapped tenant to escrow monies to accomplish the restoration once the handicapped tenant moves out. We cover this kind of stuff there. And this question always comes up too. When you talk about alcoholism and mental disabilities, What about, are there limitations there? And the answer is yes. Here's an exemption to that. Handicap discrimination does not include persons who are illegal drug users or persons who pose a health or safety threat to others. So if you are a landlord or a realtor and you are dealing with someone who is a convicted and known illegal drug abuser, or someone who, because of their mental incapacities, pose a health and safety threat, you can deny them the right to move into a property that you're dealing with. And there's some other exemptions as well. This one is always discussed. Can an individual owner of a property pick and choose the person or persons who either rents or buys that property? The answer is yes. Yes, they are exempted from the fair housing laws if, and this is a big if now, if the owner, number one, does not own more than 3 single-family homes. If they own 5 or 10 or 15, they're basically property managers, not considered owners. So the first is if the owner does not own more than 3 single-family homes. Number 2, if the owner or landlord does not use a real estate agent. The minute one of us is employed, then the federal fair housing laws fall into play. Number 3, they do no discriminatory advertising. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. They can't run an ad that indicates a preference for a certain race or a certain color or a certain religion. Number 4, they're exempt if they own up to a 4-plex if they occupy one of the units. And then finally, if they've had only one sale in the last 24 months, if not owner occupied or not the most recent resident. So there is an individual owner exemptions, but there are a lot of strings attached to that. There are exemptions to families with children, for example. Number of persons per bedroom and certain on-site facilities. For example, in an apartment complex, even though you can't discriminate against families with children, you can have, say, a pool or an exercise room that says no one under 18 without an adult. That's not a violation. And an example of where you can pick male or female sex would be college dormitories. It can be an all-woman's dorm or an all-male dorm. Here's an exemption for religious organizations or a private club. They may limit the sale or rental to persons of that same group, so long as membership is not restricted to race, color, or national origin. For example, there can be, pick a religion, a Presbyterian retired minister's home, and the only people who can live there are retired Presbyterian ministers. But what they can't say is white retired Presbyterian ministers or black retired Presbyterian ministers. There is where it would be a violation of the federal fair housing rules. There are some older person exemptions too, but I won't get into this because it's pretty technical and pretty complicated, and we'll obviously cover this in the course, but because of time, let's move on. Here's a very important part of the course. Fair housing do's and don'ts. This is real world stuff right here, and this is the kind of information your agents need to know. And you need to look at the first couple of these, brokers. You do need to have a company policy and a commitment to fair housing. So ask yourself this question: do you have a fair housing company policy? Look at the second do. Do you and your people participate in agent training to ensure compliance with your fair housing company policy and the federal fair housing laws? Do you identify and correct fair housing violations? Do your people treat all prospects courteously, fairly, professionally, without any regard to their differences? Do your people give all prospects equivalent services and assistance in such areas as interview information, qualifying information, selection of properties shown, pre-qualifying information, and follow-up procedures? And in the course, I get into specific details of this. I'll show how they should act and what they should not do when it concerns equivalent services. And it's amazing how often this is violated. And here comes a key to the course. What do your people say? What do your people say to a buyer or a seller who asks or requests or demands to a showing of a property or the listing of a property, and it's a violation of federal fair housing laws? Look at this. I'm going to read this one to you, them three of these. Do you people know to say this? It is the policy of my company and my broker to abide by all local, state, and federal laws prohibiting discrimination against any individual or group of individuals protected by the fair housing regulations. I, the agent, have no duty to disclose the racial, ethnic, or religious composition of any neighborhood, community, or building, nor whether persons with disabilities are housed in any home or facility, except that I may identify housing facilities that meet the needs of a disabled occupant. Do you people know to say something like that when they're confronted with a fair housing issue? Or look at this one. This is the second option. Do say there are some very strict federal laws that prohibit discrimination against members of that protected class. It might have been requested by a buyer or a seller. It is the policy of my company, as well as my own policy, not to address or answer any inquiries concerning this issue, because it is illegal for me to do so. And you drive that point home. In addition, any type of response by any real estate agent concerning this issue may be a violation of the federal fair housing laws. Therefore, I cannot participate in this discussion. And then here's a third option that I will give them in the class, and we will rehearse and practice these in the course. Do say every real estate situation must be considered only on the merits of the transaction and the property itself, and not on any other criteria, especially as it pertains to any member of the protected class that's being discussed. Otherwise, and I like this last statement, otherwise, I cannot represent you in this transaction as your real estate agent. Those are the three answers that I think are adequate. I'll have to tell you, I used to teach this in my own training in my former real estate company. I would conclude a statement like that with something like this. If that's important to you, buyer or seller, you need to check out the neighborhood for yourself. I no longer teach that, because I think even saying if that's important to you, you're implying that it might be important. And if we as licensees under the federal fair housing rules and regulations, I don't think even need to acknowledge that it might be important. So here are the three options that I will give them in the class, what you should and not say. Here's what you don't say. And I think this is important they hear this too, because this happens some of the time. Don't say, I know I shouldn't say this, but this neighborhood is changing for the worse based on the presence of a protected class. I personally would not want to live here. Don't say, you may not be happy here because most of your neighbors are not like you. Don't say, you might want to consider this neighborhood because most of your neighbors are like you. And don't say, you might want to list with me right now before a certain class of people move in here and your property value go down. We teach this in the class, and I can assure you they have heard these words before. I talk a little bit about testers. Yes, there are testers, and the real estate licensees need to know that testing is out there. Look at this slide right here. Program was established in 1991 by the Civil Rights Division of the Housing and Civil Enforcement section of the DOJ to allow testing to evaluate compliance with the Federal Fair Housing Act. Testing is a well-established and judicially recognized simulation of a housing transaction that compares the information, services, and treatment given by housing providers to different types of home seekers to determine if illegal discrimination is occurring. So I'll let them know that there are testers out there, but we get into the specifics of that. And this is a slide that may disturb them some, and let me talk about it just a little bit while we have time. Testers are individuals who, with no intent to purchase or rent, pose as prospective buyers or renters for the purpose of gathering information. They often work in teams made up of different groups of individuals. They will appear identical except for their one obvious difference, which may be their race or their color. They can lie on their applications. In fact, they will, because they will appear identical on the application. They will appear identical. They will attempt to buy or rent, and they will take notes on their treatment. Then they will compare the notes. And if your agent treated a majority buyer, for example, different than a minority buyer, and the testers get together and compare their notes and see the difference, if they are treated differently, they may file a complaint. That's the way it works. So your people need to be aware that there are testers in the field. And what's so interesting about testers, and look at this slide, and I'll include the part on testers. Since 1992, 98 testing cases have been filed as a direct result of the Fair Housing Testing Program. 96 of those cases have been resolved, resulting in the DOJ's recovering over $12.9 million. And this is straight from DOJ's website, including over $2.3 million in civil penalties and over $10.5 million in other damages. And what's so interesting about testers, and I've always found it intriguing that agents get so concerned about a tester. This is such an easy problem to solve. And you solve it by doing one thing: don't discriminate in the showing and selling or leasing of housing. Then you never have to worry about a tester. But we will talk about testers in the course and how to deal with testers. Now, we don't have a lot of time on this, but I want to show it to you because I think it too is an important part of the course. I talk about marketing and advertising, and I give them examples of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable concerning marketing and advertising, because I know that some licensees and realtors get in trouble here as well. So let me show you a couple of examples of this. Concerning race, color, or national origin, this is acceptable. Racially and ethnically neutral terms such as great schools, rare find, desirable neighborhood, and in the course I'll give more examples of this. But unacceptable concerning race, color, national origin are words that describe the present residence, not the housing, or the neighborhood in racial or ethnic terms such as white families only, no Mexicans, or mixed neighborhood. That is unacceptable. And again, I will give more examples in the actual 3-hour course. Concerning religion, it's acceptable to use secular terms such as Merry Christmas, Happy Easter, images of Santa Claus, or words that do not state a preference for persons likely to employ the services offered, such as apartment complex with a chapel or kosher meals available. Anyone can use the chapel and anyone can eat the kosher meals, anyone of a protected class. Here's what's unacceptable concerning religion: words that contain an explicit preference, limitation, or discrimination to religion, such as Christian tenants only, or no Muslims, or atheists welcome, or religious symbols such as Star of David or representation of a cross. You can't do that. Concerning sex, this is acceptable. Terms that do not indicate a gender preference, or common terms that describe the physical conditions of the house, such as large master suite, mother-in-law apartment, bachelor pad. Those are acceptable. Here's what's unacceptable concerning sex: ads that indicate a gender preference, such as men only or females only. Watch this one. I told you the ADA is very active in policing the marketplace for the handicapped and the disabled, and they, more than anybody right now, seem to be really tuned in to the way we market and advertise. Watch this. What is acceptable are words or phrases that indicate no limitations, such as great view, 4th-floor walk-up, jogging trails, non-smoking residents only, and wheelchair ramp. Those are acceptable. Great view. You say, well, as someone who is blind, they cannot appreciate the view. That's correct, but these are indicate no limitations. 4th floor walk up. If they're handicapped and can't walk, they can't walk up to the 4th floor, obviously. And notice wheelchair ramp. You say, wait, isn't that, aren't you discriminating? No, you're in essence saying this house does have a wheelchair ramp. Therefore, someone who is limited to a wheelchair can use the ramp to enter the house. So that is acceptable. Here's what you can't say concerning handicap. Words or phrases that contain explicit exclusions, limitations, or indications of discrimination based on handicap, such as no wheelchairs, no cripples, or teetotalers only. You can't say that. Family status, familial status. This is acceptable. Ads that describe properties, facilities, or neighborhoods with no preference to familial status, such as cozy family room, quiet streets, no bicycles. You can say this in an advertising and marketing program. Here's what you can't say. This is what's unacceptable. Ads that state an explicit preference, limitation, or discrimination based on familial status, such as no children, couples only, singles only. I think this part of the course, if nothing else gets their attention, this will. And I will cover this in greater detail, and you'll see in a second how I'll drive this home. Here are the penalties if you failed, if your people or you failed to comply with the federal fair housing rules and regulations. HUD, up to $16,000 fine for the first violation and $70,000 fine for the third or more violations within 7 years. Department of Justice, up to $11,000 for the first violation, $27,500 for the second violation within a 5-year period of time, and $55,000 or more for more than 2 violations within 7 years. But watch the plus. Here's where the big dollars will occur. Plus, compensatory damages to the complainant, the one who filed the lawsuit or the complaint, as well as damages for mental anguish, humiliation, and psychological damages. Now, let me bring this to a conclusion because we're about out of time. One of the most interesting parts of the course is a study I have done of actual case studies that are now published in a matter of the public record. I will work through these case studies and share these case studies with the students in the class, and they will see that this is real world stuff. And some of the things they will hear about that real estate licensees have actually done concerning violation of federal fair housing rules and regulations are unbelievable and blatant. But we will look at some actual cases, and then of course I'll conclude the class. But the way I'll conclude again is to talk about not where we've been, but where we need to go. And the other thing I will conclude is by saying this, that of all the rules and regulations that govern us, for example, Alabama license law, for example, the Realtor Code of Ethics, of all the rules and regulations that govern us, the easiest rule and regulation to comply with are the federal fair housing rules and regulations. It's very simple. Don't discriminate.
Great. So some great info today.
Thank you, Josh. My pleasure. And thank you all for being here.
Yeah,
too.
Thank you all for joining us today. We've got just some quick announcements of some things, some programs that are coming up in the future, the next few months. I'll share those with you quickly here at the end of our webinar. Tell you how you can find the course that Jim's been referencing today. So here's information. We're rolling this course out here in Montgomery the day before Realtor Day, Jim. We're excited to do that with you. 1:30 to 4:30 p.m. On April 21st at the Montgomery Area Association of Realtors. $10 per student to attend. And the cool thing about this is that if you can't make it down or your agents can't make it down on the April 21st, your association, your local association can host this course too. Through a generous support of the Alabama Association of Realtors and the Alabama Center for Real Estate, Jim's organization, we're able to bring this deep discount, and we're excited about that. We feel like this is a topic that you and your agents will appreciate and can learn a lot from. So if you can take advantage of this, please do so on April 21st. If not, encourage your local board to look into bringing this course and to bringing Jim there to teach it. Many of you have seen information about our upcoming Recharge event. That's on April 7th in Birmingham. And we've just received 6 hours of CE approval. You can visit alabamarecharge.com for more info and ticket prices available there. I mentioned Realtor Day a minute ago. April 22nd is our yearly annual Realtor Day at the Capitol, where we rally the State House on issues of home ownership and private property rights. So join us then. Our GRI classes are in full swing across the state and available for $45 per month. The price is beginning that low, so check out alabamarealtors.com/GRI. You can see the website listed there for you. We're excited to announce here on this brokers webinar that we're bringing Ninja Selling instructor Terry Johnson July 22nd through the 24th for the unprecedented low price of $99 per day. Ninja Selling 1, 2, and 3 are all CRS electives, but are also just great sales training for you and your agents. So if you're looking for something for this summer and some great sales training, check that out. alabamarealtors.com/ninja. You can see there. And then also, if you want to learn more about Ninja Selling, ninjaselling.com. Last month, if you joined us, you saw our new agent training program with Bernice Ross. That's available now at alabamarealtors.com/new agent. You can also view the webinar from last month there, find out more info about the course. Paperless Agent is a new partner of Alabama Realtors. If you're looking to truly move your business paperless and, like it says, win more listings by doing so, you can view webinars and free videos, training, all available at alabamarealtors.com/paperless. We had a webinar last week, and I can send you the link to that. All this info about education is available at our new hub, alabamarealtors.com/edu. So you don't have to remember all these websites that I'm talking about. Just remember alabamarealtors.com/edu. So Jim, thanks for joining us today. If you guys have questions for Jim or anything about what we covered in this class, or want more info about the class coming up, or want to bring the class to your local association, you can reach out to me, Josh, at alabamarealtors.com, or you can call the association office here. You can also reach Jim on ACRE's website. His full information and contact there. Many of you know him already. So on behalf of the association and on behalf of Jim, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you on our next Brokers webinar.
Brokers, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.